If you listen to the loudest voices in American politics, you'd think the federal government is little more than a bloated bureaucracy that does more harm than good. For decades, anti-government rhetoric has dominated certain political circles, insisting that Washington is inefficient, wasteful, and overreaching. But there is a paradox at the heart of this sentiment. Most Americans do not actually experience the dysfunction they are told to resent. Their daily interactions with the government often come in the form of services they rely on but rarely think about, until those services disappear. A government shutdown forces that realization. What was once an abstract debate about big government becomes an immediate, tangible problem. Tax refunds are delayed, passports go unprocessed, and national parks close. Military service members and federal law enforcement officers continue to work without pay. Programs that provide food and housing assistance for low-income families are suddenly thrown into uncertainty. Air traffic controllers and TSA agents, unpaid and overworked, begin calling out sick, leading to flight delays and heightened safety concerns. A shutdown makes government visible not through inefficiency but through its absence. The push for extreme budget cuts has long been fueled by a narrative rather than by personal experience. Politicians and media personalities tell Americans that government is the problem, pointing to scandals, wasteful spending, and bureaucratic red tape as proof that Washington is broken. This storytelling has been effective, shaping public opinion even among those who directly benefit from government programs. But when the government shuts down, those benefits are no longer invisible. The absence of essential services exposes the disconnect between the anti-government narrative and the reality of daily life in the United States. There is a psychological phenomenon at play here. People often take for granted the systems that function smoothly until those systems are disrupted. When something as routine as a passport renewal becomes an indefinite waiting game or a tax refund fails to arrive on time, individuals who never considered themselves reliant on the government suddenly find themselves frustrated by its absence. The realization sets in. I didn't think I needed the government, but now that it's gone, I realize I do. History suggests that direct disruptions like these can shift public sentiment. During the 2018 to 2019 government shutdown, the longest in U.S. history, public support for then-President Trump's demand for border wall funding eroded as people experienced the consequences of the shutdown firsthand. The idea of withholding government funding for a political fight sounded reasonable in theory, but in practice it created chaos, from delayed paychecks for federal employees to increased travel disruptions. Similarly, moments of crisis such as natural disasters or the COVID-19 pandemic have often led to increased public demand for government intervention when state and local resources proved insufficient. When people see the limits of individual action or state-level responses, they recognize the necessity of a functioning federal government. The political implications of this shift in perception are significant. For Republicans pushing for deep spending cuts, a shutdown might initially seem like a demonstration of their commitment to reducing the size of government. But the longer a shutdown drags on, the more it risks backfiring. If Americans begin to feel the direct consequences of government inaction, they will demand a resolution, not through permanent downsizing, but through restoring the services they suddenly realize they depend on. This places Republicans in a difficult position. If they insist that the shutdown is insignificant while millions of Americans experience disruptions, they risk appearing out of touch. If they concede that certain government services should continue, they undermine their broader argument that government is an unnecessary burden. Either way, the longer a shutdown lasts, the harder it becomes to maintain the illusion that the federal government is little more than a bureaucratic hindrance. Ultimately, people don't notice when government works. They only notice when it stops working. A shutdown flips the narrative, turning government from an abstract talking point into an undeniable presence in everyday life. For those who want to dismantle the federal government, this is a dangerous gamble. Because when Americans live without government services for long enough, they might just realize how much they actually need them.